My name is Chet Jai. I'm 80 years old, and I want to begin by saying something that might immediately challenge how you are reading this title. Being happy in every situation is not what most people imagine it to be. It is not a performance of positivity. It is not the pretense that difficulty is actually fine. It is not the forced smile that covers real pain. It is not spiritual bypassing dressed in pleasant language. I have lived too long and encountered too much genuine difficulty to speak to you about happiness in that way. What I am pointing toward is something much more honest and much more demanding, a quality of inner orientation that does not depend on circumstances being favorable, a relationship with your own experience that allows genuine well-being to coexist with genuine difficulty, and 10 Buddhist teachings that, when truly understood and truly practiced, make that possible in a way that no amount of positive thinking ever could. Maybe right now the idea of being happy in every situation sounds either naive or completely out of reach. Maybe your current circumstances make this feel like a cruel joke rather than a genuine possibility. Maybe you have tried various approaches to happiness and found them insufficient for what your actual life requires. If any of that is true, stay with me, because what Buddhist teaching offers is not a way of feeling better about difficult things. It is a fundamental reorientation of what happiness is, where it comes from, and what it actually requires. I was born in northern Thailand in a life that was not arranged for my comfort. Early difficulty taught me that happiness tied to external conditions was a fragile and unreliable thing. I watched people suffer when conditions changed and struggled to find contentment when conditions improved. I watched myself do the same. And when I entered the monastery, I carried the implicit assumption that spiritual practice would finally produce the stable happiness that ordinary life had failed to provide. That assumption was not wrong, but the path that fulfilled it was almost the opposite of what I had imagined. The first teaching is this: happiness is not a destination. This sounds simple. It is not. Most people live as if happiness exists somewhere other than where they currently are. After the achievement, after the resolution, after the condition changes, after I become the person I am trying to become. All of that framing places happiness perpetually out of reach, because there is always another condition to be met, another achievement to arrive, another version of yourself still incomplete. The first teaching of genuine happiness is that it is available here, in this moment. Not because this moment is perfect, because this moment is the only place where life actually exists. The second teaching is that suffering comes from craving and aversion, not from circumstances. This is perhaps the most important and most misunderstood of all Buddhist teachings. The pain of loss is real. The pain of injustice is real. Physical pain is real. But a large portion of what we call suffering is the additional pain of wanting what is to be different from what it is, of requiring pleasant experiences to continue and unpleasant experiences to end. The circumstances of a life can be genuinely difficult, and the suffering can be manageable, or the circumstances can be comfortable, and the suffering can be immense. The difference is almost never in the circumstances. It is in the degree of craving and aversion that the mind is bringing to them. The third teaching is impermanence as liberation rather than loss. We most often encounter impermanence as grief, as the ending of what we loved, as the change of what we wanted to keep. But impermanence, genuinely understood, is also what makes every difficult moment temporary. The pain passes, the confusion clears, the loss softens. Nothing that is difficult is permanent, just as nothing that is pleasant is permanent. Holding this equally in both directions, not only applying it to comfort you about difficulty, but also holding it about what is pleasant, so that you inhabit it fully instead of gripping it anxiously, is the practice of impermanence as liberation. The fourth teaching is non-attachment, which is consistently misunderstood as non-caring. Non-attachment does not mean not loving. It does not mean not engaging. It does not mean not having preferences or not working toward what matters. It means holding all of that without the desperate requirement that it remain exactly as it is. Loving without possessing, engaging without demanding a particular outcome, caring deeply without making your inner peace entirely dependent on how things turn out. That is a different quality of engagement than most people have been taught, and it produces a different quality of happiness, one that is not constantly threatened by the natural movement of life. The fifth teaching is the practice of present moment awareness, not as a technique, as a recognition that the past exists only in thought, and the future exists only in thought, and that the only place where life is actually happening is here. Most suffering, when examined carefully, is either about the past or about an imagined future. The present moment, when genuinely inhabited, is almost always more workable than the mental weather surrounding it. Not always easy, but genuinely inhabitable. The practice of returning to this moment, repeatedly and without drama, is one of the most direct paths to the happiness this title points toward. The sixth teaching is the cultivation of equanimity, not as a substitute for feeling, but as the ground beneath feeling. Equanimity is the capacity to be fully present to what is happening, without being entirely at the mercy of what is happening. To feel grief without becoming grief, to experience frustration without being governed by frustration, to encounter difficulty without treating difficulty as the final word on the quality of your life. This is built gradually through practice. It is not a natural temperament, it is a trained capacity. And it changes the relationship between your inner life and what the world brings far more reliably than any change of circumstances could. The seventh teaching is compassion, including compassion for yourself. A significant portion of the suffering most people carry is generated not by what happens to them, but by how they treat themselves in response to what happens. The harsh internal voice, the unforgiving standard, the way difficulty is converted into evidence of personal failing. Genuine self-compassion is not self-indulgence. It is the recognition that difficulty, error, and limitation are part of being human, and that the quality of how you treat yourself when you encounter your own humanity matters enormously for your capacity to experience genuine happiness. The eighth teaching is the recognition that happiness is a practice rather than an achievement. This changes the entire orientation. If happiness is an achievement, then it is always in the future, always contingent on something not yet complete. If happiness is a practice, it is available in this moment, not as a feeling that has arrived fully formed, but as an orientation you bring to what is here. The practice of returning to presence, the practice of releasing craving, the practice of meeting difficulty without resistance, the practice of finding something genuine in ordinary moments. These are not paths to happiness, they are happiness in its most honest form. You know what surprised me most? The moments of deepest contentment in my life have almost never come from exceptional circumstances. They have come from ordinary moments inhabited with unusual quality of attention. A simple meal eaten slowly and with genuine presence. A conversation where I was fully listening rather than managing. A morning where I noticed the quality of light rather than moving through it. The ordinariness of these moments is not incidental, it is the point. Happiness that requires exceptional circumstances will always be rare. Happiness that is available in ordinary moments, when ordinary moments are genuinely inhabited, is available constantly. The ninth teaching is that genuine happiness and genuine pain can coexist. This might be the most counterintuitive of all. We tend to imagine happiness and pain as opposites, as if the presence of one necessarily excludes the other. But Buddhist practice reveals something different. A person can be grieving a real loss and simultaneously experiencing a quality of inner peace. A person can be living with genuine difficulty and simultaneously finding something worth appreciating in the morning. This is not spiritual bypassing. It is the discovery that the inner life is wide enough to hold more than one truth at the same time, and that the practice of happiness is not the elimination of pain, but the expansion of the inner space large enough to hold pain without being entirely defined by it. The 10th teaching is the simplest and perhaps the most radical. Happiness is already here. Not in the sense that everything is fine, in the sense that the awareness that notices what is happening is itself untouched by what is happening. The suffering and the awareness of suffering are not the same thing. The difficulty and the consciousness that experiences difficulty are not the same thing. There is something in you that has never been destroyed by what has happened to you, something that remains present and clear even in the most difficult moments. That something is the deepest ground of genuine happiness, and the entire path of Buddhist practice, in all its forms and all its teachings, is ultimately pointing at that. Not somewhere else, not in a better future, right here, in this awareness, in this presence, in what remains when you stop adding the unnecessary. What most people don't realize is that none of these 10 teachings require favorable circumstances to practice. They do not require your pain to end. They do not require the difficult people in your life to change. They do not require the situation to improve. They require only the willingness to look honestly at where you are standing and to begin to practice from exactly there. That is all. And that beginning, however modest and however imperfect, is the beginning of a genuine relationship with happiness that no external condition can take away. At 80 years old, I can say that my life has not been without difficulty. It has not been without loss. It has not been without periods of genuine darkness. But it has also, increasingly, been inhabited by a quality of contentment that does not require things to be different from how they are. Not because I have become indifferent to how things are, but because I have discovered, slowly and imperfectly, that there is something available in every moment that is not at the mercy of every moment. And that discovery, more than anything else, is what I understand by being happy in every situation. Tell me in the comments which of these 10 teachings speaks most directly to where you are right now. And if this message gave you something real, stay close to this space. Because the path toward genuine happiness is not a single insight. It is a practice returned to again and again. And having somewhere to return to makes that practice possible.